In this video I'm gonna show you exactly how you can paint water VFX like these ones in only 6 steps. What's up guys, Lucas here. This channel is all about art and art related subjects, so if that is something that you like, consider subscribing. So I spent the last couple of days studying different artists and the way that they approach water, painting water VFX. And in general, I think that I feel confident enough that I can tell you that it is very easy to do if you approach it in the right way. I have two different types of VFX here in general. We have the art of kaizanblu, who is a fantastic artist that maybe you have seen somewhere in social media, and he approaches water in what I would call a more realistic way, where water has this transparency and you can see what it has behind. And then we have this other, more maybe anime or cartoony approach, where you can see that water has more color, more opacity, and therefore then it is easier to paint it and easier to see. Today we're gonna look at how to paint this specific type of VFX step by step, because that is what I think most people have in their mind when they think water VFX. But if you are more interested on how to paint this type of more realistic water, then let me know in the comments, because I feel confident that I can show you guys how to do it and how to replicate the style of rendering of water from kaizanblu. Alright, so let's go and get started. Here are the 6 steps that we're gonna go through, and we're gonna start by making a new canvas and approaching the shape of that VFX. I'm just gonna fill up this whole canvas with a dark color. Generally, I saw that it is easier to approach VFX if you have a dark background against which to see them. And here I'm gonna make a bit of a gradient so that we have something a bit more interesting to look at. Okay, so you have two different possible approaches for step number 1, which is the shape. You can either make the drawing of the VFX or you can just go directly with paint. In my case, I think that I'm gonna go with paint because it saves me more time. So I'm just gonna grab the lasso tool and start making a shape for the water that I intend to paint. You don't have to get a complete and perfect shape at this first stage, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. I would just try to get something that feels organic and that has a bit of a direction or a movement. Once I'm slightly happy with the shape, we can fill it up with a color and we can start making some corrections. Even though you can, of course, do all of this with the lasso tool, I find that involving a bit the brush can make the whole shape feel a bit more natural. It gives me the opportunity to find some happy accidents. In this part of the process, I find that it doesn't matter much which type of VFX you're trying to paint. All of them have a bit of a similar shape. Maybe you're going to go a little bit more bubbly if you're painting water, and a bit more spiky if you're painting something like electricity or fire, but besides that, they're gonna be very similar. Okay, that covers the step number 1, and that is the shape. Of course, we can continue changing this shape later in the process, but I think that this is enough for us to pass to step number 2, and that is going to be the interior of the figure. What do I mean with the interior of the figure? Well, the thing is, I have found that most of the shapes when I am painting water or when people are painting water VFX are white parts of the water. As you can see here, all the border is white, and then it has these dark interior shapes. Now, that is not true always, but whenever you're trying to simulate something that looks more like a wave, you're going to have foam happening on the borders of the silhouette. So like you can see in here, you have again these dark figures in the center, and then they are surrounded by white. So what we just painted, this first step, is going to be the white on the surrounding, and now we're going to go in the interior and we're going to start painting these dark parts that are going to be the shadow of the figure, or better said, the non-foamy parts of the water. This step should be very easy. The only thing that we have to do is lock the transparency of this first layer, and I'm gonna give it a bit of a more whiter color so that this can be the foam. And now in this second layer, we're gonna start making the shapes for the shadow. Just like with the shape, we can start with something rough like this and then slowly start changing the shape. The color that we give it for now doesn't matter much, but I'm gonna go with this like grayish blue. I'm gonna flip the canvas so that I can see the shape with some new eyes, and now with the eraser and the brush I'm gonna just start cutting just like I did with the shape on the exterior. I'm gonna start cutting this shape and give it some more details and some more organic shapes inside. Maybe the most important part of VFX, if I dare say, at least with what I have discovered, is how we have to try to make them feel natural and not man-made. They have to feel graceful and fluid, but also not done on purpose. So if you see any type of repeating pattern or something that looks a bit more planned than what you would like to, this is a good moment to get rid of that. And if you're curious about what I mean with man-made, this is what I mean in here. You see that there is one shaping here and another shaping here, and they're very symmetrical, and then we have this one in the center. It looks a bit like a croissant type of thing, right? So that to me looks a bit man-made, and what I would like to accomplish is something that feels more like a small, big and medium, instead of being both of this small, and then this one big. So let's try and break that pattern, but making this shape a bit smaller than the rest. Awesome, that feels a bit better to me. Another very important thing that I am not doing right now, and you guys should do, is to remain far away from what you're painting. I am painting on a Cintiq, and it's a pretty big Cintiq, so when I am zooming in right here, the whole drawing is kind of like the size of my two hands together, and that is way too close. At this stage of the process, I don't need to see the whole thing so close. It is better if I remain far away, like in this case my canvas is 2500 by 2000 and I am seeing this thing at 60%. You can see those numbers right here in the corner of my screen, just in case that you're curious. So stay far away from your screen and stay zoomed out so that you can focus on the big picture and not on the details. And if you see anything that you want to change on the original shape, then it is as easy as just going back to that layer and adding or cutting whatever you don't like. Alright, so that is step number 2. Those are the interior shapes. And now we have 2 layers. One is this layer that has this interior shape for the water, and this other one that is more like the foam that surrounds the water. So now the next one, step number 3, is going to be the shadows of our shape. And for that, we need to put shadows in both layers. We have, as I told you, the interior and the foam. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new layer for both of those, and I'm gonna clip them. That means we're not going to be able to get out of the border. So if, for example, I paint in the one for the foam, you can see that I cannot get out of the shape of the original foam. And what I'm gonna do with this is I'm gonna select the color of the foam, and I'm gonna imagine that I'm selecting the color of the shadow of that foam, and I'm gonna imagine that the light is coming from above, so that is going to make my foam have some shadows, for example here in the interior shapes or here in these lower parts. For this part it is especially important that you remain far away from your painting, so just imagine that your stream of water or your VFX is actually 3-dimensional, so then these parts are going to have a bit of a shadow and these parts also. And again, if you don't like anything out of the shape or the shadows or even the interior shapes, you can just go in and edit them, because it is still time for you to change these type of things. Okay, so now that we have the shadows for the foam, we need to go and make some shadows for the interior shapes, for these shapes right here. And studying the work of this girl, Marina Nechaeva, I found that these random shapes of shadows work the best when putting in the shape of the water. So we're gonna approach it like that. Kind of like also the shadows that I made in here that don't precisely follow the 3-dimensional shape of the water, but they are just some suggestions of volume. So in this new layer, the one that is clipped, we're going to start and making some big shapes, kind of like in a zigzag shape that will make, hopefully, our water feel like it has some movement. So you see, the more that we work on the VFX, the more loose we can be with these new steps, because the foundation or the shape that we worked from before already looks decent. So now we can have some fun with more organic shapes. For this part, there is no system. I am just simply making some shadow shapes or some random color variation in here that feels right. I know it can be frustrating to watch a tutorial and hear the person that is making the tutorial tell you that it just has to feel right, but I'm sorry, that is at least how it works with this part. If it's any consolation, I don't think that you can go wrong with any type of shapes, as long as you are trying to avoid what I told you before and trying to not make something that looks very artificial or man-made. Now this part is optional, you could just leave the shadows as they are right here, but if you want to make your visual effect a little bit more interesting, something that I tried before and also helped a lot is to add some more variation on the colors that we have in here, so more complicated patterns that make the visual effect more interesting to look at. So I'm just gonna select a different color and start going throughout the whole VFX, adding these small lines that hopefully will make the whole thing just a tiny bit more interesting. You could do this part of the VFX also in the same layer, but I recommend that you make everything in its own layer, because that way you're going to be able to change the colors very easily on whatever detail that you want to change in the future. Also, if you were to be animating this, it would be much better for you to keep things separate on their own layers so that you can animate things separately. And just like I told you before, because you can change this thing at any moment in the whole process, I am feeling like the whole effect is a bit too bubbly, so I want to have some sharper edges here and there. So I'm going with the eraser on the original shape and getting rid of some of those bubbly edges and replacing them with harsher, sharper edges like this. Alright, and that is the shadows. Now, I hope that you are seeing how easy this thing is, because in all honesty, when I was trying to get a hang of this process, the moment that I started doing this thing step by step, I realized that it can be very easy and very relaxing to make something that feels more organic and that you can in some way not ruin by not knowing how to do perfect anatomy or something like that. So I really recommend that you give it a try. It is a very meditative thing to draw. Now let's go to step number 4, and this is the gradients. Now here is where the whole effect starts coming really nicely together. So let me show you what I mean with gradients. The first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna grab all of the layers. By now you should have 3, 4, 5 layers. We're gonna grab all of them and we're gonna lock the transparency of all the layers. And instead of using the brush that I was using before, I'm gonna use this LP airbrush that is just simply a very big soft airbrush, and we're gonna start putting the right colors or the final colors on our whole painting. Something that I think I want is to give a bit more saturation to the color of my water, and maybe make the color of my foam just a tiny bit more saturated or having a bit more color. For the shadow of my foam, I think I'm gonna go with something that also has a tiny bit more color. Awesome, something like this I think will work better. And now that we have oh, and let's not forget these tiny little guys in here. They are very gray right now, so let's see if we can put a bit of color. There we go. Okay, so now that we have all of those colors tweaked and a bit better, we're going to grab that airbrush and we're gonna start making some gradients around the whole thing. So for example, I can grab the foam, the light of the foam, and I can make it so that it's shinier right here where it turns inside itself, while it can be a bit darker right on this side. Same thing with the shadow, we can make it darker here, and also the water itself. There's no right way for you to make these gradients. I would tell you to just try and imagine if this would be an actual three-dimensional object, where would you have some gradients? Where is the part of the object that is hit by the light? Like for example, I am choosing that this part that is closer to the camera is gonna be a bit more in shadow than this one that is farther away from the camera. So it just accentuates the three-dimensional shape of the object. And also, it's a great moment or a great excuse for you to introduce a bit more color variety into your painting. That is why here I am putting a bit more of a purple, while here I have a bit more of like a cyan or light blue color. So there you go, that is step number 4, easy enough, right? That is the gradients. So now we can move to step number 5, and that is the shines of our VFX. Now this one is very enjoyable or very rewarding because it is very easy to do and it's gonna take your VFX to another level. So let's just go and create a new layer above everything. This one you don't have to click towards anything and you can actually leave it in normal mode. We're gonna grab an opaque brush and I'm just gonna put pure white, and I'm gonna start putting some nice little shines all over my VFX. You don't have to be very precise with how to do it, with how you're doing it, but having them in a shape of a fan is something that I see works very nicely. So for example here, I can make them go out a bit like in that shape, or having some bigger spots also helps. Like for example here I can put some bigger dots. And even though I think it is very easy to just put them all over the place, I think that then you can go a bit overboard and you can ruin the effect of those effects. So let's just erase a few of them because you don't want to have them absolutely everywhere. Speculars are something that it's better in moderation. So let's just put them here and here. And now I hope that you're ready for some magic because I'm gonna show you how to make them shine. And it is super easy. Just duplicate the layer. So now we have 2 layers that have both of them the effect, that have both of them the specular. You're gonna grab the one that is below and you're gonna add a bit of a blurring here. So it's very easy here in Photoshop. You just go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and you're gonna add just a tiny bit of a blur, tiny bit of a blur, and there you go. That is the effect. Let me just flip it around so you guys can see it. That is the effect before and after, and it is very nice, very subtle, but it really makes the whole thing shine. So we're gonna just fuse those two, and those are our speculars, and that is it with the shines. Okay, so let's go to step number 6, and that is the blur. This part of the effect is a bit optional, but I think that it really adds a lot to your effect. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna just group all the layers, and I'm gonna duplicate them, and I'm gonna fuse this one right here so that it is a flat object. Then I'm gonna grab a smudge tool, and in this case I'm gonna be using from my smudgers, I'm gonna use this LP Smudge Smoke, and what I want you to do is very carefully just start going in the direction of the effect. So if this effect is turning into this way, I want you to move the brush in that direction so that you blur the effect in the direction that it is moving. So just grab that smudge effect and we're gonna just slowly start moving it in the direction where it is going. You can use this step to change the shape of your effect, but I wouldn't do it too much because otherwise you're gonna end up with smoke instead of water. And just very easily just go over the whole thing. You can leave some parts that are not blurred, but I think it looks better if everything is a little bit blurry in the direction that it is moving. And if there are some parts, like for example here in the interior, where you want to have more of a blur effect, you can go with higher opacity. And it's gonna do the trick. Okay, so that is step number 6, that is the blur, and you can see the effect from before, how much better it looks after a little bit of directional blur. Here is now, and here was before. And guys, I saved the best for last, and this is step number 7, and it's gonna make miracles with your VFX, and that is the bloom. Maybe instead of bloom, I should have called it post-production, because that is more what this part of the effect is, and it is going to really change the quality of your VFX. So I definitely recommend that even if you don't do the blur, you do this 7th step that is the post-production. Step number 1 that I want you guys to do is create a very easy bloom effect that you can do in any painting software, and that is to duplicate your layer, put the one that is above in lighten mode, and I'm gonna go to the filter and add a blur, Gaussian blur. If you like anime aesthetic, this is the effect for you. It is going to make your paintings feel so much softer, much nicer. No, don't go overboard with it because it can make everything feel a little bit too dreamy. So something around 8 pixels for me is what does the trick. That is step number 1 of the post-production. The next one is to create a new layer, and this one you're going to put in color dodge mode, or you can also use linear dodge or whatever your software has in there. I'm gonna remove these couple of checks here in Photoshop because otherwise it doesn't work completely good, and I'm gonna just select whatever color I want, and I'm just gonna start adding some bloom and some light to this visual effect. I think I'm gonna tweak a bit the color of the background so that it's more saturated and darker. I'm just gonna go over the whole thing, making it feel a little bit more magical. If you would want, this is a good moment for you to add some little bubbles in there. And some little particles just moving around the effect. We can also blur these bubbles so that they feel right in sync with the rest of the effect. And add a little bit of that color dodge magic to them. We can use the same color dodge layer to add a bit of God rays here and there in case that we are making something that feels like an underwater scene. And I'm gonna use this dust brush to add a tiny bit of particles or whatever just floating around the water. And that is step number 7, bloom or post-production. And there you go guys, that is the 7-step process for you to paint water VFX in an easy way. And I definitely recommend you guys that you give it a try because it is a pretty relaxing and pretty enjoyable process, and you can come up with something that looks pretty awesome very easily. Thank you very much guys for watching this video until the end. If you want me to paint all other types of VFX, let me know in the comments. And of course, if you want to support this channel and get something very nice for yourself, go and check out my LP painting brushes down there in the description. I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye!